Harald Hardrada. Harald Sigurdsson, also known as Harald of Norway and given the epithet Hardrada in the sagas, was King of Norway from 1046 to 1066. He also unsuccessfully claimed both the Danish throne until 1064 and the English throne in 1066. Harald is born. Harald was born in Ringerike, Norway in 1015 to Åsta Gudbrandsdatter and her second husband Sigurd Syr. Sigurd was a petty king of Ringerike and without doubt one of the strongest and wealthiest chieftains in the uplands. Harald was the youngest of King Olaf II of Norway's 3 half-brothers, through his mother Åsta. In his youth, Harald was a typical rebel with big ambitions and admired Olaf as his role model. He was different from his 2 older brothers, who were more like their father and focused on the farm. Battle of Stiklestad. In 1028, Harald's brother Olaf rebelled and was forced into exile. He returned to Norway in early 1030. On hearing news of Olaf's planned return, Harald gathered 600 men from the uplands to meet Olaf and his men upon their arrival in the east of Norway. After a warm welcome, Olaf promptly gathered an army and eventually fought in the Battle of Stiklestad on 29th of July 1030, in which Harald fought alongside his brother. The battle was part of an attempt to restore Olaf to the Norwegian throne, which had been captured by the Danish king Knut the Great, Canute. The battle resulted in a crushing defeat for the brothers at the hands of the Norwegians loyal to Knut. Olaf was killed, while Harald was badly wounded. Harald was undoubtedly a talented military leader during the battle. Kievan Rus. After the crushing defeat at the Battle of Stiklestad, Harald managed to escape with the help of Ragnvald Brusason, later Earl of Orkney, to a remote farm in eastern Norway. He stayed there for some time to heal his wounds, and then, possibly up to a month later, he journeyed north over the mountains to Sweden. A year after the Battle of Stiklestad, Harald arrived in Kievan Rus's, also known as Gardariki or Svithjod hin Mikla. He spent at least part of his time in the town of Staraya Ladoga, Aldigjuborg, arriving there in the first half of 1031. Harald and his men were warmly welcomed by Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise, whose wife Ingigerd was a distant relative of Harald. Yaroslav recognized Harald's military potential and made him a captain of his forces, realizing that Harald was badly in need of military leaders. Harald's brother, Olaf Haraldsson, had previously been in exile to Yaroslav following the revolt in 1028. Morkinskina says that Yaroslav embraced Harald first and foremost because he was the brother of Olaf. Harald took part in Yaroslav's campaign against the Poles in 1031 and fought against other Kievan enemies and rivals in the 1030s, including the Chudes in Estonia, the Byzantines and the Pechenegs, and other steppe nomad people. In Byzantine service. After a few years in Kievan Rus, Harald and his force of around 500 men moved on south to Constantinople, Miklagard, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, where they joined the Varangian Guard. While the Varangian Guard was primarily meant to function as the emperor's bodyguard, Harald was found fighting on nearly every frontier of the empire. He first saw action in campaigns against Arab pirates in the Mediterranean Sea, and then in inland towns in Asia Minor Anatolia that had supported the pirates. By this time, he was indisputably the leader over all the Varangians, according to Snorri Sturluson. Eastern campaigns. By 1035, the Byzantines had pushed the Arabs out of Asia Minor to the east and southeast. Harald took part in campaigns that went as far east as the Tigris River and Euphrates River in Mesopotamia. The Skald Thjodolfar Arnorsson, as recounted in the sagas, states that Harald participated in the capture of 80 Arab strongholds. This number is corroborated by historians Sigfus Blöndal and Benedict Benedicts. Sicily. In 1038, Harald joined the Byzantines in their expedition to Sicily in George Maniakes's, the saga's Gurge, attempt to reconquer the island from the Muslim Saracens, who had established the Emirate of Sicily on the island. Harald fought alongside Norman mercenaries such as William Iron Arm. Battle of Olivento. In 1041, when the Byzantine expedition to Sicily was over, a Lombard-Norman revolt erupted in southern Italy, and Harald led the Varangian Guard in multiple battles. Harald fought with the Catapan of Italy, Michael Docayanos, and they had initial success. However, the Normans, led by their former ally William Iron Arm, defeated the Byzantines in the Battle of Olivento in March and in the Battle of Montemaggiore in May. Harald to the Balkans. After the defeat, Harald and the Varangian Guard were called back to Constantinople. This was following Maniaca's imprisonment by the emperor and the onset of other more pressing issues. Harald and the Varangians were thereafter sent to fight in the southeastern European frontier as the Balkan Peninsula in Bulgaria. They arrived in late 1041. There he fought in the army of Emperor Michael IV in the Battle of Ostrovo of the 1041 campaign against the Bulgarian uprising led by Peter Delian. Harald gained the nickname the Bulgar Burner, Bulgara Brenir, by his skald for his role in this battle. Harald imprisoned Harald's favor at the imperial court declined rapidly after the death of Michael IV in December 1041, which was followed by conflicts between the new emperor Michael V and the powerful Empress Zoe. Harald was arrested and imprisoned during the turmoil, but the sources disagree on the grounds. The sources disagree on how Harald got out of prison, but it is likely that he was helped by someone outside to escape in the midst of the revolt that had begun against the new emperor. Harthacnut, King of England, died. Despite Harthacnut promising the English throne to Harald's nephew Magnus, Edward the Confessor, son of Ethelred the Unready, became king. Back to Kievan Rus. After Zoe had been restored to the throne in June 1042 together with Constantine IX, Harald demanded to be allowed to return to Norway. Zoe refused, but Harald managed to escape into the Bosphorus with 2 ships and some loyal followers. He married Elizabeth, referred to in Scandinavian sources as Elisif, daughter of Yaroslav the Wise and granddaughter of the Swedish king Olof Skutkonung during his second stay there. Back to Scandinavia. Seeking to regain the kingdom lost by his half-brother Olaf Haraldsson, Harald began his journey westwards and arrived in Sigtuna in Sweden, probably at the end of 1045. King of Norway. On his return to Norway, Hardrada reached an agreement with Magnus the Brer that they would share the rule of Norway. In 1047, King Magnus died, and Harald became the sole ruler of Norway. Harald was determined to re-establish Magnus's rule over Denmark. He was no stranger to warfare, having previously fought alongside Swine against Magnus's rule in Denmark. His campaigns against Swine consisted of swift and violent raids on the Danish coasts. Harald was victorious in most of the engagements, but he was never successful in occupying Denmark. Battle of Nice. Despite Harald's raids on Denmark, he was determined to win a decisive victory over Swine. He set out from Norway with a great army and a fleet of around 300 ships. Swine had also prepared for the battle, which had been pre-assigned a time and place. Swine didn't show up at the agreed time, so Harald sent home half of his forces, the non-professional soldiers, Bonda Heron. When the ships were out of reach, Sweyn's fleet finally appeared, possibly with 300 ships. The battle was a resounding victory for Harald, who vanquished the Danes. 70 Danish ships were reportedly left empty. Many ships and men managed to escape, including Swine. During the battle, Harald was a formidable opponent, shooting with his bow like most others in the early phase of the battle. Edward the Confessor dies. Harald seized the English throne and invaded England. In March or April 1066, Harald began assembling his fleet at Solund in the Sognefjord. By the start of September 1066, he had completed the process and included his flagship, Ormen, or Serpent. Harold invades Harald Hardrada, and Tostig Godwinson invaded the north of England with around 10-15,000 men on 240-300 longships. They met Tostig and his 12 ships at Tynemouth. After embarking from Tynemouth, Harold and Tostig landed at the River Tees. They then entered Cleveland and started plundering the coast. They sailed through the Humber estuary and up the River Ouse, disembarking at Rickhall. Battle of Fulford. The Earls Morcar of Northumbria and Edwin of Mercia were quick to react to the invasion, and they fought against Harold's invading army 2 miles, 3 kilometers, south of York at the Battle of Fulford on 20th September. Harold and Tostig emerged triumphant from the Battle of Fulford on 20th September, forcing York to surrender on 24th September. Death of Harold, Battle of Stamford Bridge. Harold and Tostig left Rickhall with most of their forces, leaving a third behind. They had only light armor, expecting to face the citizens of York. Non-Saga sources confirmed that the English forces were held up at the bridge for some time by a single gigantic Norwegian, allowing Harold and Tostig to regroup into a shield wall formation. However, Harold's army was ultimately defeated. Harold was struck in the throat by an arrow and killed early in the battle in a state of berserker gang, having worn no body armor and fought aggressively with both hands around his sword.
We offer you deep historical information from history on YouTube channel. Subscribe. Now don't forget to turn on notifications.